Okay, let's get into this. If you've ever dealt with, tangled JavaScript files in the browser, global variables clashing everywhere, trying to figure out dependencies.
Oh yeah, the classic script tag juggling act.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this deep dive is for you. We're talking ES modules
Right.
right in the browser. It's the modern native way to handle your JavaScript.
It really is a fundamental shift. And the key thing, I think, is that the browser natively understands them.
Right.
You don't always need complex build tools just for basic code organization anymore. And because it's native, the browser can optimize things much better.
And how do you actually use them? Is it complicated?
No, getting started is surprisingly simple. Instead of just script to src, you add type module. So like script type module src.main.js script.
Ah, okay, just that type module attribute.
Yeah.
And the browser knows what to do.
Yep, it signals, hey, treat this as an ES module. The whole idea is breaking your code into smaller, focused files.
Right, modules.
And these modules control what they share using export and what they use from other modules using import.
Okay, so export and import, let's break that down. I saw a lot about named exports. That's when you export specific things.
Exactly. You might have a utils file, maybe export a couple of functions, a constant. The syntax is like export utilski, utility function. You list them in curly braces.
Got it. And then to use them somewhere else.
You use import with the same curly braces and names. Import utilski utility function from atils.js. The path tells the browser where that utils.js file is.
Makes sense. But sometimes a module just does, like one main thing, right? It's a single class or function.
Yeah, absolutely. For that, you've got a default export. You can only have one default per file.
Okay, one default. How does that look?
You just write export default and then whatever you're exporting, like export default process, no curly braces needed on the export side.
And importing that default.
Also no curly braces. And you can actually give it any name you want when you import it. So import my processing function from .dataprocessor.js would grab the default export from dataprocessor.js and call it my processing function locally.
Ah, flexible naming on the import side for defaults.
Oh.
Cool. And quickly, there's also something about import as utils.
Right, the namespace import. That grabs everything exported from a module named exports mostly and puts them onto a single object. So import as utils from .utils.js means you'd access things like utils.utilski or utils.utility function. It bundles them all up.
Okay, so this export-import system, it feels quite different from, say, common JSDC, Node.js.
It is, yeah. And probably the biggest difference is how they load. ES module import is asynchronous.
Asynchronous. Okay, what does that mean in practice compared to, like, require?
Well, require in many older systems was often synchronous. The code would literally stop and wait for the required file to load and execute.
Right, which could block things, especially in a browser.
Exactly. ES module import doesn't block like that. It's designed to work efficiently in the browser's asynchronous environment. And of course, the keywords are different. Import to export versus require module.exports.
And something else people coming from Node might miss. Certain globals aren't there.
That's a big one, yeah. In browser ES modules, you don't have require, module, or exports as global-like variables.
And no dir name or file name either.
Nope. Those rely on a file system concept that doesn't directly translate to the browser module loading context. You need to rely on relative paths or newer things like import maps.
So modules have to be more self-contained. Another point was strict mode.
Ah, yes. ES modules automatically run in strict mode. You don't need to declare ustrict at the top.
Which is generally good practice anyway, right? Helps avoid common errors.
Definitely. It prevents things like accidental global variables.
Yeah.
Also, a subtle point. The value of this at the very top level of an ES module is undefined.
Not the window object, like in classic scripts.
Correct. It encourages writing code that doesn't depend on the global object quite so much.
Okay, so we've got the basic import statement at the top of the file.
Okay.
But there's also a way to load modules later, dynamically.
Right, the import function call knows the parentheses. It looks like a function.
Okay, import is how does that work?
It returns a promise. This is super powerful because it means you can load a module whenever you need it, maybe conditionally.
Like only if the user clicks a button.
Exactly. Imagine you have a really heavy library for, say, charting. You don't want to load it up front. You could do something like .button.add event listener, click async, await import, chart-library.js charting module.draw chart.
Ah, so you await the import promise and then you get the module's exports. That could really help with initial page load times.
Huge difference for performance, yeah. Load code only when it's actually needed.
And this all ties back to scope, doesn't it? Variables inside a module aren't just global anymore.
Precisely. Anything you declare with let, const, or var inside an ES module is local to that module by default. It does not get added to the global window object.
So no more accidental name collisions between different scripts or libraries.
Much less likely. You have to explicitly export something for it to be usable outside the module. It enforces encapsulation.
So putting it all together, ES modules give you this standard browser-native way to organize JavaScript. It seems like it leads to code that's easier to manage, less prone to errors.
And potentially faster, because the browser handles the module loading efficiently. It's about creating maintainable, performant applications using built-in browser features.
Right, so thinking about how you design your apps, moving from maybe one giant script file or even older module systems to this native scoped, potentially dynamic approach.
Yeah, it kind of forces you to reconsider things. How does this change how you architect your front end? How do you think about code splitting and delivery when the browser itself gives you tools like dynamic import?
That's definitely something to think about. How does embracing native modules fundamentally shift your design patterns? Good food for thought.